The desert stretched endlessly beneath Lieutenant Marcus Vega's F-16, a canvas of tan and shadow where nothing moved except heat shimmer. His radio crackled with the usual chatter call signs, coordinates, fuel states, but something felt wrong. The sky was too quiet, too empty. He'd been tracking a hostile convoy for 20 minutes, waiting for close air support that should have arrived 12 minutes ago. His finger hovered near the transmit button when the world shifted. It started as a dark speck on the horizon, low enough that he almost dismissed it as ground interference. But then the speck grew, resolving into something angular and deliberate. An A-10 Thunderbolt, flying so low its shadow kissed the dunes. Vega watched through his canopy as the aircraft approached the convoy's position, its titanium bathtub gleaming dull gray in the afternoon sun. The Warthog's wings were heavy with ordnance, and for a moment everything was still. Then the frame snapped apart. The A-10's nose erupted with fire, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon unleashing a sound that wasn't quite sound, more like the earth tearing itself open. 30-millimeter rounds chewed through the convoy's lead vehicle, then the second, then the third, each impact precise and devastating. Smoke bloomed black against the sand. The aircraft pulled up in a steep climb, banking hard right, and Vega caught a glimpse of the tail number. He didn't recognize it. "Hammer 2-1, this is Viper 3-4, identify yourself," he transmitted, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The A-10 completed its turn and dove again, this time releasing a pair of Maverick missiles that streaked downward like falling stars. The explosions were surgical. No wasted movement. No hesitation. "Viper 3-4, Hammer 2-1, sorry for the delay, had to take the scenic route." The voice that came back was calm, almost casual, with a slight rasp that suggested too many hours in a cockpit breathing recycled air. Female. Unfamiliar. Vega frowned. He'd been briefed on every asset in the theater. This callsign wasn't on any roster he'd seen. "Hammer 2-1, confirm your squadron." There was a pause, just long enough to feel deliberate. The A-10 made another pass, its cannon spitting death with mechanical precision. When the voice returned, it carried something else beneath the calm, something that might have been amusement or might have been resignation. "Confirm squadron. That's classified, Viper, just enjoy the show." The convoy was burning now, black smoke pillars reaching toward a sky that suddenly felt too vast. Vega watched the A-10 level out, its frame solid and unshakable against the chaos below. Whoever was flying that bird knew exactly what they were doing, and they weren't supposed to be here. The debriefing room at Al-Dafra Air Base smelled like burnt coffee and stale air conditioning. Major Collins sat across from Vega, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming against a manila folder that looked too thin to contain anything important. Behind him, a projector displayed frozen satellite imagery of the convoy strike-perfect bomb damage assessment, textbook execution, 0 civilian casualties. Everything by the book except for one glaring problem. "There is no Hammer 2-1, Collins said flatly. "No flight plan filed, no mission briefing, no aircraft assigned to that callsign in this theater of operations." Vega leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Sir, I watched her work. She knew every grid coordinate, every target priority. That wasn't some rogue pilot joyriding through hostile airspace." Collins opened the folder, sliding a single photograph across the table. It showed an A-10 on a tarmac somewhere, its paint faded and chipped, tail number partially obscured by maintenance scaffolding. This aircraft was decommissioned 8 months ago, scheduled for depot maintenance at Davis-Monthan, except it never arrived. "Ghost plane," Vega muttered. "Ghost pilot," Collins corrected. He pulled out another document, this one bearing a security classification stamp that made Vega's stomach tighten. "Captain Rene Kovac, former A-10 driver, 3 combat tour, 2 distinguished flying crosses, more confirmed kills than most fighter squadrons combined. Disappeared from the active roster 14 months ago after an incident in Syria." Vega studied the photograph clipped to the file. Kovac stared back at him through the glossy paper-sharp features, dark eyes that seemed to assess everything, short hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She looked like someone who'd stopped caring about appearances and started caring only about results. What kind of incident? Collins hesitated, his finger tracing the edge of the classified stamp. The kind where you save 30 Marines surrounded by enemy armor, disobey direct orders to RTB when your fuel state is critical, and land your shot-up bird on a highway because you refuse to leave them behind. The kind where command doesn't know whether to court-martial you or give you another medal. So they did nothing, Vega said. They did worse than nothing. They grounded her pending investigation, shuffled her paperwork through channels that move slower than continental drift, and eventually she just vanished. No official resignation, no discharge papers, no forwarding address. Until today, we thought she'd left the military entirely. The projector cycled through images of the convoy strike. Each frame showed mathematical precision, the work of someone who'd spent thousands of hours perfecting the art of close air support. Vega had flown with the best pilots in the Air Force, and this was better than best. This was obsession refined into skill. Why would she come back? He asked. Collins closed the folder. That's what you're going to find out. Quietly. This doesn't go through official channels, and it sure as hell doesn't go on any report. Find Kovac, find out what she's doing with that aircraft, and bring her in before someone higher up the chain decides this is a problem that needs a more permanent solution. Vega stood, the weight of the assignment settling onto his shoulders like lead. And if she doesn't want to be found, then you better hope you're a more persuasive than you are a pilot, Lieutenant. Because if Reappeared Kovac decides to disappear again, not even satellites will spot her shadow. The abandoned airstrip sat 40 miles west of the border, a relic from some forgotten proxy war that had left runways cracked and hangars rusting under an indifferent sun. Vega drove his borrowed Humvee through the gate, past signs warning of unexploded ordnance and structural instability. The place looked dead, but fresh tire tracks in the sand suggested otherwise. He found the A-10 inside the largest hangar, its nose facing the open desert like a predator watching prey. The aircraft looked older than its years, paint weathered to primer in spots, maintenance panels secured with mismatched fasteners. But the engines were clean, the weapons pylons empty and ready, and the canopy glass reflected his approach with perfect clarity. "You're persistent," a voice called from somewhere above. Vega looked up to see Kovac sitting on the hangar's catwalk, legs dangling over the edge, a wrench in one hand and what looked like a hydraulic line in the other. She wore a flight suit with no name tape, no rank insignia, nothing to identify her except the oil stains on her sleeves and the confidence in her posture. "Captain Kovac," he began. "Just Kovac. The rank doesn't mean much when you're technically a deserter." She dropped the wrench, and it clanged against the concrete floor with a sound that echoed through the empty space. "They sent you to bring me in." "They sent me to talk." "Same thing." She stood, wiping her hands on a rag that looked older than his career. "Let me guess, Collins is worried I'm going to start a diplomatic incident. Flying unauthorized combat missions tends to make the brass nervous." Vega moved closer to the A-10, running his hand along its nose where the cannon housing showed wear from repeated firing. That convoy was carrying chemical weapons precursors. Intelligence confirmed it 3 hours after your strike. You saved lives yesterday. "I save lives every day," Kovac said, climbing down a rusted ladder with practiced ease. "That's what this bird was built for. That's what I was trained for. The fact that command forgot that doesn't change the mission." She landed beside him, and up close, Vega could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the kind that comes from flying alone, maintaining an aircraft alone, making life-and-death decisions alone. Her eyes were still sharp, still assessing, but there was something else there too. Something that might have been loneliness or might have been defiance. "Why hammer 2-1?" he asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her expression softened slightly, a crack in the armor. "My grandfather flew B-17s over Germany. His call sign was Hammer. When I got my wings, when I first sat in this cockpit and felt what it meant to carry that cannon, I knew what I wanted to be. Hammer 2-1. The next generation of the weapon that protects the people on the ground who can't protect themselves." "Your grandfather would be proud," Vega said quietly. "My grandfather is dead, like most of the men he served with, like most of the Marines I've pulled out of hot zones. Pride doesn't bring anyone back, Lieutenant. Results do." They sat on the Humvee's hood as the sun bled orange across the horizon, turning the desert into something almost beautiful. Kavak had agreed to talk, which Vega counted as progress, even if she hadn't agreed to anything else. She drank water from a canteen that looked military-issue circa 1990, and he wondered how long she'd been living like this alone, off-grid, sustained only by whatever mission she'd assigned herself. "The incident in Syria," he started carefully. "Collins mentioned Marines. What happened?" Kavak was quiet for a long moment, watching the shadows lengthen across the sand. When she spoke, her voice had lost its edge, replaced by something rawer. 32 Marines, surrounded by 9 T-72 tanks and about 200 infantry. They'd been holding a bridge for 6 hours, waiting for extract that kept getting delayed. I was on CAP 50 miles north when their air controller made the call. They needed close air support, and they needed it 10 minutes ago. "You diverted without authorization." "I diverted because that's what you do when Marines are dying. Command told me to hold position, said they had F-15s inbound with precision munitions. I told Command the Marines didn't have 20 minutes to wait for precision. They had maybe 5. Vega could picture it, the desperate radio calls, the calculations running through her head, fuel state versus transit time versus ordnance required. The kind of math that determines who lives and who becomes a statistic. "So you went," he said. "So I went. Burned through my missiles first, took out 4 tanks before they knew what hit them. Then I went low, so low I could see faces in the windows of buildings I was passing. The GAU did the rest. 30 millimeters doesn't care about armor when you put enough rounds in the same spot. By the time those F-15s arrived, I'd neutralized 8 tanks and most of the infantry. The Marines walked out. But your aircraft didn't." Kavak smiled without humor. "Took hits from 2 ZSU-23s. Lost hydraulics, half my instruments, and about 300 gallons of fuel from holes I couldn't even see. Flew that bird on backup systems and pure stubbornness for 90 miles before I found that highway. Landed it like a student on her first solo bounce twice, blew both tires, but I walked away. And Command grounded you for saving them." "Command grounded me for making them look bad. For proving that sometimes the book is wrong, that sometimes you have to trust the pilot in the cockpit who can see what's happening in real time. They couldn't court-martial me because the Marines I saved were all talking to reporters, calling me a hero, and the optics would have been catastrophic. So they buried me in paperwork instead, hoping I just quit." "Why didn't you?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Vega saw something he hadn't expected: hope, fragile and fierce. "Because the mission doesn't stop just because the bureaucracy gets in the way. Because somewhere right now, there's another unit surrounded, another convoy carrying weapons that shouldn't exist, another pilot who might not have the experience to make the hard call. That's why I rebuilt this bird. That's why I fly." The first communication from Collins came 3 days later, encrypted burst transmission to Vega's secure device. The message was brief: situation developing, multiple units requesting CAS, assets stretched thin, Kavak's actions being monitored, recommend immediate resolution. Translation: they knew she was still flying, still operating in the shadows, and patience was running out. Vega found Kavak running pre-flight checks on the A-10, her movements methodical and precise. She didn't look up when he approached, just continued working through her checklist with the focus of someone who'd done this ritual 1,000 times. "They're going to force the issue," he said without preamble. Let them try. She tapped a gauge, frowned at the reading, made a note on the pad strapped to her thigh. I've got 3 missions planned for this week. 2 reconnaissance, 1 direct action. All legitimate targets, all approved through back channels. Back channels? You think I'm doing this alone? There are people in command who remember what it's like to fly combat missions, who remember that rules exist to protect the mission, not prevent it. They feed me intelligence, I provide results. Everyone's happy except the colonels worried about their promotion boards. Vega climbed onto the wing, positioning himself where she'd have to acknowledge him. Renee, this can't last. Eventually, someone's going to decide you're more trouble than you're worth, and then it won't matter how many lives you've saved. They'll send fighters to intercept you, ground-based air defense, whatever it takes to bring you down. She finally looked at him, her dark eyes unreadable. Then I'll make it count before they do. Every mission, every sortie, every round I put through that cannon, it all counts. That's more than most people get to say about their lives. It's also suicide. It's purpose. She pushed past him, moving to the aircraft's tail section. You want to know what happened after Syria? After they grounded me? I spent 8 months in a cubicle, reviewing flight training protocols, writing reports nobody read, watching missions get scrubbed because the approval process took too long. I watched good pilots get cautious, conservative, scared of making the call I made. And I watched Marines die because the system valued procedure over results. Her voice had risen, emotion breaking through the professional calm. Vega let her continue. So yes, Lieutenant, this might be suicide, but it's honest suicide. It's dying for something instead of withering away in some office, counting days until retirement, wondering if I could have made a difference. I'd rather burn out in this cockpit than fade away behind a desk. The sun was setting again, painting the A-10's titanium bathtub in shades of copper and gold. Vega thought about his own career, the compromises he'd made, the times he'd followed orders he disagreed with because that's what you did. Looking at Kovac, he wondered if following orders was always the right answer. "Teach me," he said suddenly. She blinked, surprised for the first time since they'd met. "What?" "Teach me how you do it. The precision strikes, the low-level flying, the way you read a battlefield. If they're going to shut you down, at least let someone else learn from what you've built here." The training started before dawn, with Kovac drawing diagrams in the sand, using a stick and handful of rocks to represent terrain features, targets, threats. Vega crouched beside her, his tablet recording everything while she explained the geometry of attack angles, the physics of cannon fire from a moving platform, the psychology of ground forces who'd learned to fear the A-10's silhouette. "The Warthog isn't a fighter," she said, pushing rocks into formation. "It's a scalpel designed to look like a hammer. Everyone sees the armor, the redundant systems, the survivability features, and they think brute force. But the real art is in the finesse, knowing exactly where to cut, how deep, when to back off and reassess." She demonstrated with the stick, tracing attack runs that seemed suicidal until she explained the sight lines, the way terrain masked approach vectors, the split-second timing required to engage before defenders could react. "You're not trying to outrun missiles or outmaneuver enemy aircraft. You're trying to become part of the landscape until the moment you strike. Then you're the weather inevitable, impersonal, unstoppable." They moved to the aircraft next, Kovac walking him through the cockpit with a reverence usually reserved for places of worship. Every switch, every gauge, every backup system was explained not just in terms of function, but in terms of philosophy. This bird was built by people who understood that pilots are going to get shot. The question isn't if you'll take damage, it's whether you can still complete the mission after you take it. She showed him the manual flight control system, mechanical cables that could fly the aircraft even if all hydraulics failed, the redundant electrical systems, the separated engines, the titanium bathtub that could withstand 23mm rounds. Most modern fighters are computers that happen to carry pilots. The A-10 is a pilot's aircraft that happens to have computers. The difference matters when everything goes wrong. The first flight happened that afternoon, with Vega in the back seat of a cobbled-together two-seat training variant that Kovac had somehow acquired and modified. The takeoff was violent and loud, the engine screaming, the airframe rattling, everything feeling like it might shake apart at any moment. Then they were airborne, and Vega understood why she loved this machine. It flew like it looked heavy, determined, refusing to quit. Kovac put the aircraft through maneuvers that should have been impossible for something so large, rolling inverted at 200 feet, pulling up at angles that grade his vision, demonstrating the brutal efficiency of an airframe designed for one purpose. When she lined up on a practice target, an abandoned tank left from some previous conflict, the cannon fire was apocalyptic. The entire aircraft shuddered, the nose disappeared in smoke and fire, and the target ceased to exist. "Your turn," she said over the intercom, her voice calm as always. "Show me what you learned." Vega took the stick, feeling the weight of the aircraft transfer to his hands. It was nothing like his F-16, nothing like the responsive, nimble fighter he'd spent years mastering. This was wrestling with physics itself, fighting to make 10 tons of metal and weapons do what you wanted through sheer force of will. But as he lined up his own attack run, as he felt the GAU-8 roar to life beneath him, he began to understand what Kovac had been trying to teach him. This wasn't about elegance or precision flying. This was about commitment, about deciding what needed to be done and refusing to stop until it was finished, no matter what stood in the way. The message arrived during their fourth training session, delivered by encrypted email to an account Vega didn't know Kovac had. She read it on a battered laptop, her expression darkening with each line. When she finished, she closed the computer with exaggerated care, the kind of control people use when they're fighting not to throw something. "What is it?" Vega asked. "Mission request. Direct from a JTAC Joint Terminal Attack controller embedded with Special Forces 20 miles inside hostile territory. They've been tracking a high-value target, got solid intelligence he's meeting with cell leaders at a compound tomorrow at dawn. They need precision strike capability, and they need someone who won't accidentally level the surrounding village. So call in official channels, get F-15s or a drone strike." Kovac shook her head. "Already tried. The compound is too close to a civilian population center. Command won't approve the mission without 48 hours of additional surveillance to confirm no collateral damage risk. By then, the target will be gone." "But you'll approve it." "I'll assess it. There's a difference." She pulled up satellite imagery on the laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The compound appeared a cluster of buildings surrounded by walls, situated at the edge of a small village. Civilian structures were close, maybe 200 meters from the nearest compound building. A difficult shot, a dangerous shot. "The JTAC's call sign is Paladin 6, Kovac continued, zooming in on the imagery. "He's requesting a single Maverick missile through a specific window at a specific time, synchronized with their ground assault. They'll mark the target with an IR designator, but the margin for error is about 2 meters. Miss and you kill civilians. Hit early and you warn the target. Hit late and you leave the Special Forces team exposed." Vega studied the image, calculating angles and approach vectors automatically. "This is exactly the kind of mission that got you grounded last time. This is exactly the kind of mission that justifies this entire aircraft's existence. The A-10 was built for close air support, for working danger close with ground forces who are in contact. If I can't do this, if I'm not willing to take this risk, then what's the point of any of it?" She was right, and Vega hated that she was right. He thought about the Marines in Syria, about the convoy they destroyed together, about all the missions that existed in the gray space between official approval and operational necessity. The military had rules for good reasons, but sometimes those rules ground people up who didn't deserve it. "I'm coming with you," he said. "The hell you are. You need someone on radio coordination, someone who can interface with official channels if this goes sideways. Plus, if they're going to court-martial someone over this, better it's 2 pilots than 1. Solidarity looks better on paper." Kovac studied him for a long moment, and Vega watched something shift in her expression, surprise giving way to something that might have been gratitude. "You understand what you're risking. Your career, your reputation, possibly your freedom. I understand that some missions matter more than careers. You taught me that." He gestured at the laptop. "Now show me the flight plan so we can figure out how not to kill anyone who doesn't deserve it." They worked through the night, plotting approach vectors, calculating fuel states, wargaming contingencies. By the time dawn broke over the desert, they had a plan. It was dangerous, probably illegal, and absolutely necessary. Exactly the kind of mission that defined what it meant to be a military pilot when the chips were down. The flight to the target area took 90 minutes, flown at altitudes low enough that Vega could count individual rocks on the desert floor. Kovac piloted with absolute concentration, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes scanning instruments and terrain with practiced rhythm. In the back seat, Vega monitored radio traffic and managed the mission timeline, coordinating silently with Paladin 6 through encrypted burst transmissions. "Paladin 6 Hammer 2-1, inbound your position, ETA 12 minutes, Kovac transmitted, her voice professional and calm. "Hammer 2-1, Paladin 6, solid copy. Target is in the building, confirmed by thermal imaging. We're in position for the breach. The window is on the northwest corner, 2nd floor. IR designator will be active at mission time. Paladin 6, confirm civilian presence in adjacent structures." There was a pause, the sound of voices conferring in the background. "Hammer, we've confirmed structures are empty. Villagers moved out yesterday, probably warned about the meeting. You're clear to engage." Vega pulled up the satellite overlay on his display, cross-referencing the coordinates. The compound sat exactly where intelligence had predicted, walls casting long shadows in the early morning sun. He could see the window Kovac would need to hit small, partially obscured by an awning, offering maybe a 2-meter margin of error at best. "Coming up on IP," Kovac announced, referencing the initial point where their attack run would begin. The A-10 was flying at 300 feet, fast enough to make targeting difficult for ground fire but slow enough to maintain accuracy. Vega felt his heart rate increase, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "Tally target," Kovac said, her voice unchanged. She banked the aircraft, lining up on the approach vector they'd calculated. The compound appeared in her HUD, and Vega watched as she made microscopic adjustments, bringing the crosshairs onto the designated window. The IR designator appeared on their sensors, a tiny point of invisible light marking the exact impact point. "Rifle," Kovac called, the standard announcement that a missile had been fired. The Maverick dropped from the wing pylon, its engine igniting, the weapon accelerating toward the compound while Kovac immediately pulled the A-10 into a hard climbing turn. Vega watched the missile track on their display, a white line connecting aircraft to target, geometry resolving into destiny. The Maverick disappeared through the window exactly as planned. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the compound's 2nd floor erupted in a controlled explosion destructive enough to kill everyone inside the target room, contained enough that the surrounding structures remained intact. Smoke boiled from the window, but the walls held. Good hit," Paladin 6 called over the radio, excitement breaking through his professional composure. "Target destroyed. We're moving in now. Hammer 2-1, that was textbook. Thanks for the support." Kovac didn't respond immediately, just flew the aircraft through a series of defensive maneuvers, clearing the area before hostiles could respond. Vega watched her shoulders relax slightly, tension bleeding out now that the mission was complete. When she finally spoke, Her voice carried something he hadn't heard before, satisfaction mixed with vindication. Paladin 6 Hammer 2-1. Mission complete. Good hunting down there. Hammer out. She changed frequencies, switching to their private channel. Mark that 1 in the win column, Lieutenant. You made it look easy. It's never easy. It just looks that way when you've done it enough times. She leveled the aircraft, setting course for their hidden airstrip. Welcome to the mission that matters. The debrief happened in the hangar, sitting on the A-10's wing while the engines ticked and cooled in the afternoon heat. Kovac had a notebook open, recording mission details with the meticulousness of someone who knew this might be evidence someday. Vega checked his secure phone compulsively, waiting for the inevitable message from Collins demanding explanations. "Stop that," Kovac said without looking up from her notes. "Watching the phone won't change what's coming." "Doesn't stop me from worrying about it." He put the device away, forcing himself to focus on the present. "That was the cleanest strike I've ever seen. The JTAC sounded like you'd just performed a miracle." "Miracles are when unexpected good things happen. That was just preparation meeting opportunity." She closed the notebook, turning to face him fully. "This is what I've been trying to explain, Marcus. This is what they grounded me for. The ability to take the mission command says is too risky and execute it perfectly because I've done the work, practiced the scenarios, refused to accept failure as an option. They grounded you because you scared them. They grounded me because I made them look irrelevant. Every time I fly a mission they said couldn't be done. Every time I bring that aircraft back from damage they said was catastrophic. I'm proving that the bureaucracy is often the biggest obstacle between good pilots and successful missions. That's threatening to people whose entire career is built on maintaining that bureaucracy." Vega couldn't argue with that. He'd seen it himself, the layers of approval required for simple decisions, the risk-averse culture that prioritized avoiding blame over achieving results, the way innovative thinking got punished unless it came from the right rank and the right schools. Kovac represented something dangerous to that system, proof that competence mattered more than process. His phone buzzed. The message was from Collins. "Aware of unauthorized mission, need to meet. Bring Kovac, this is not optional." Kovac read the message over his shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Well, that was faster than I expected. He's either more plugged in than we thought, or Paladin 6's debrief made some noise up the chain." "What do you want to do?" She slid off the wing, landing with practiced ease. "We go meet Collins. Face this head-on. I'm done hiding, and honestly, I'm tired of operating in the shadows. If they want to ground me permanently, court-martial me, whatever, let them do it in the open where everyone can see exactly why they're punishing someone for saving lives." "That's a hell of a gamble." "I've been gambling my whole career, Lieutenant. The only difference now is that I'm betting on principle instead of just survival." She started walking toward the Humvee, then paused, looking back at him. "You don't have to come to this meeting. Your career's still salvageable. Mine's probably toast no matter what happens." Vega followed her without hesitation. "I told you solidarity. We're in this together." The drive back to Al Dafra took 3 hours, and neither of them spoke much. Kovac stared out the window at the passing desert, her expression distant, while Vega drove and tried not to think about the career he was probably about to sacrifice. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered that Maverick disappearing through the window, remembered Paladin 6's grateful voice over the radio, remembered what it felt like to matter. Some things were worth the cost. Collins's office looked different in the afternoon light, smaller, somehow, with shadows pooling in the corners and stacks of folders creating improvised fortifications on every surface. The Major sat behind his desk like a general planning a siege, but when Kovac and Vega entered, he just looked tired, old, like a man who'd spent too many years fighting battles that didn't matter while the real war happened somewhere else. "Captain Kovac," he said formally, "thank you for coming in." "Major, though we both know I didn't really have a choice." She remained standing, arms crossed, every inch of her posture defensive. Collins gestured to the chairs, but neither of them sat. He sighed, pulling out a folder Vega recognized thick, worn, stuffed with documents that tracked Kavak's entire career from flight training to Syria to this moment. I've been reviewing your file. Did you know you have more confirmed saves than any other A-10 pilot currently serving? More than most pilots who have ever flown the aircraft, actually. 63 separate instances where ground forces credited you directly with keeping them alive. I'm aware, Kavak said carefully. I'm also aware that you've been flying unauthorized combat missions for the past 6 weeks. At least 8 that we can confirm, probably more that haven't been reported. Using a decommissioned aircraft that should be in storage. Operating without proper authorization, without flight plans, without any of the oversight that keeps pilots alive and missions successful. And yet the missions were successful, Kavak countered. Every single one. 0 civilian casualties, 0 friendly fire incidents, perfect mission execution. That's more than can be said for some authorized operations. Collins's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he pulled out another document, a day's mission report, still classified, barely hours old. Paladin 6's debrief came directly to my desk. He didn't know I was looking for you, didn't know this whole thing was off the books. He just wanted to commend the pilot who executed a perfect strike under impossible conditions. Said it was the finest piece of close air support he'd witnessed in 15 years of special operations. Then what's the problem? Vega interjected. She completed a mission that command wouldn't approve, saved American lives, eliminated a legitimate threat. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? The problem, Lieutenant, is that military discipline requires following orders even when we disagree with them. The problem is that Kavak's methods, however effective, undermine the entire chain of command structure. The problem is that if every pilot with exceptional skills decided they knew better than their superiors, we wouldn't have a military, we'd have chaos. We'd have results, Kavak shot back. We'd have pilots who could make decisions in real time instead of waiting for permission from people hundreds of miles away who don't understand the battlefield. You want to talk about discipline? I've been more disciplined than anyone in this command. I've maintained my aircraft, planned my missions, executed flawlessly. The only rule I've broken is asking permission first. Collins stood, moving to the window that overlooked the flight line. Rows of F-16 sat in the afternoon sun, orderly and regulated and exactly where they were supposed to be. I spent 20 years flying combat missions, he said quietly. 3 wars, more close calls than I can count. I've been where you are, Renee. I've felt that frustration when the system moves too slowly, when good people die because we're following procedures. I've even disobeyed orders when I thought it mattered. He turned back to face them. But I also learned that the system exists for reasons that aren't always obvious. That sometimes the slow, frustrating approval process prevents mistakes that would cost more lives than they save. That discipline isn't just about following orders. It's about maintaining a structure that allows thousands of people to work together effectively. So what happens now? Kavak asked. Now you have a choice. Collins pulled 3 folders from his desk drawer, arranging them in a precise line like he was laying out evidence in a trial. His expression remained carefully neutral, but Vega caught something beneath the professional mass calculation, maybe even respect. The Major had been a fighter pilot once, before the desk claimed him. That had to count for something. Option 1, Collins said, tapping the first folder. You submit to a formal inquiry. I write up every unauthorized mission, every violation of protocol. This goes to the Inspector General, probably ends with a general court-martial. Given your record, you'd likely avoid prison time, but you'd be dishonorably discharged. Pension gone, benefits revoked, your name turned into a cautionary tale they'll teach at the academy. Kavak's expression didn't change, but Vega saw her hands tighten slightly, knuckles whitening against her crossed arms. Option 2, Collins continued, moving to the second folder. You accept a medical discharge. We cite combat stress, the accumulation of 3 tour, Syria as the breaking point. You leave quietly, honorably, keep your benefits.